Hello and welcome to the new episode of the Fullfunnel B2B Marketing Podcast. This is your host, Andrei Zinkovich, and today I'm going to chat with my friend, Shahin Hoda, who is running account-based marketing agency in Australia called XGrowth. And we are going to discuss the specifics of marketing and running ABM programs in Asia Pacific region. I would like to hear the most common mistakes companies are making there, because it's of course all about different psychology, different mentality, and we will discuss the best cases that we can bring back to Europe and United States, and of course case studies, the things that you guys love to hear about. So Shahin, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Andre. It's a pleasure being here.
And the first thing I want to discuss with you is the statement you have in your LinkedIn profile. You say we're helping B2B technology firms build and maintain predictable revenue-focused growth engines. And I would like to ask you, what is the revenue-focused growth engine and how do you make it predictable?
All right. I mean, starting with the heavy hitting questions right off the bat. I like it. No messing around. That's great. So I mean, we talk quite a lot about ABM and the fact that when you're looking at an ABM funnel, you it's very clear what are the accounts that you're going after, and then attributing revenue to those and seeing at the end of the campaign, depending on your sales cycle, how long it is, whether you've generated revenue or not, right? So versus some of the other marketing strategies, which they do have their place. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you should drop all of that, but some of the other marketing practices that attribution becomes really hard to attribute and say, you know what, this person read this blog post and then they listened to our podcast here and saw this LinkedIn post that we did here, and then they turned into a customer, and therefore we're going to attribute that. It's very hard to do that, and it's going to become harder as well as we go through some of the changes that are coming around. So the revenue focus part of it is that we're talking about, we're working with not only marketing team but also the sales team in order to push those accounts and turn them into revenue. The predictable part, and this is the part that takes time in organizations, but it's really defining when we're looking at, if the audience are familiar with ABM, usually ABM is defined as 3 tiers, where you have the one-to-one, one-to-few, and one-to-many. And the first approach that we take working with organizations is, let's define what these tiers mean for your organization. So if you're looking at one-to-one, look, Oracle is going to do one type of one-to-one when they're trying to land a $50 million deal. And DocuSign is going to do one type of one-to-one when they're trying to land $1 million deal, right? So there is a difference between, they're both in definition are going to be doing one-to-one, but they are going to be different. The approach to one-to-one is going to be different. Same thing applies to one-to-few, same thing applies to one-to-many. So the first thing that we try to do is define what that means within an organization. So if you at your organization are going to do one-to-one, how does that look like? What does that mean? Maybe what do some of those plays look like? And then once we define those, creating benchmarks from those numbers. Okay, so if we put an account through some of our one-to-few plays, what are some of the numbers that we're going to see? If we're looking at a one-to-many with sales touch in there, we're going to see a 5% conversion. That turns into your benchmark. So then you can decide, first of all, is this an account that we want to put in one-to-one, one-to-few, one-to-many? But you also know that what is going to be the outcome when you assign an account to those tiers. So therefore, you then create that predictability in saying that, hey, this is the kind of revenue target that we want to hit. For marketing has a 30% contribution to revenue for this year. We know these are the tools that we have. This is the budget that we have at hand. How are we going to be allocating our accounts in order to be able to kind of hit those? Now, of course, this sounds perfect. That sounds like, the nirvana of ABM. It takes time. It takes perseverance. Businesses, businesses get tired in the middle of it and be like, this is not working. And they throw in the towel, and that happens all the time. But the nirvana of it is to get there. And it's usually easily a year-long exercise. So it is very important for, if an organization want to really get there, to have that patience. Usually leadership needs to be familiar with how marketing works and what are the intricacies of marketing. So, but that's what we mean by being revenue focused and being predictable. And I love you asked that question, because I imagine there are a lot of agencies that it's like the data driven thing, right? Everybody's data driven. And then you're like, dude, what does that mean? You say you're a data driven digital agency. So I appreciate putting us on the spot.
And the biggest problem I have seen when we take a look on a marketing slang, we have lots of buzzwords that make no sense to people who don't have marketing background. Demand generation, social selling, account-based marketing, growth marketing, digital marketing, whatever, inbound marketing, content marketing, PR. And when I'm asking question, for example, what's the difference between demand generation and content marketing and inbound marketing? And PR.
Crickets.
Lots of people like, well, probably you don't get it. I mean, of course I don't get it, because the goal of demand generation or inbound or content marketing is to create the demand. That's the goal, and generate target traffic and awareness, etc. And that's why I wanted to ask this question. And let me just to wrap it up, to make let's say a simple formula for our listeners. So basically, to create a predictable revenue focused engine, you need to have list of accounts. That's a part of ABM strategy. So you have 3 tiers, and now what you are doing, so basically the number of accounts in a specific tier, then a historical conversion into sales qualified opportunities. So basically, how many of these accounts will turn into sales qualified opportunities. Then you have the traditional, let's say, sales cycle lengths, and you can track it starting from, let's say, from the first engagement or from the sales qualified opportunity, up to you. But basically, you can see the entire cycle, and you can somehow calculate the payback and predict the revenue based on historical sales cycle lengths. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's definitely correct. What I would say is, if somebody, it also depends what are the objectives of a marketing campaign that you want to, or an account based approach that you want to take, right? Are you looking at net new acquisition? Or are you looking at account expansion? Are you looking at, pipeline support and pipeline acceleration, right? I know I'm throwing buzzwords out there, but, are you trying to get new accounts? Are you trying to speed up an account through your pipeline? Or are you trying to, get more money out of an existing account, right? So those all go into play when you're trying to make that decision. A lot of companies that we talk to, everybody's a lot of people talk about acquisition. They want to see acquisition numbers, and I say don't complicate it. Talk about from a marketing perspective. Talk about the meetings that you're booking, of like, if we've ran this campaign, how many meetings have we booked, and then how many opportunities have come out of that, and out of those opportunities, what is the dollar value that sales assigned to it? Because sales would have a bit of an understanding. They would go in and say, you know what, we're assessing this. This is probably a $200,000 opportunity. This is a $5,000 kind of health check. This is or this is a larger one. And really, that early stage, I think that's a pretty good metric for organizations to think about when sales has kind of put a number in. It doesn't need to go as far as a proposal being on the table and being fixed numbers, but as long as sales says, you know what, this was a good meeting, that's a win for marketing. And then when they say, this is the kind of value that I assign to this account, that's a win as well. And I think for acquisition, it's keeping it simple. Don't overcomplicate it. And I think don't listen to a lot of consultants, because consultants love to complicate stuff so they can sell more stuff. That's how it works. It's also the same thing with a lot of ABM tech providers. I love to complicate stuff to make you feel FOMO and make you feel like you need to make that purchase and get that tool, or have these crazy dashboards that you got to track. But keeping it simple, I think it's key. Now, I mean, we can again dig deeper into pipeline acceleration, and then acquisition and then expansion. But I think the core message, what I'm trying to say, is keep it simple as much as possible.
Cool. And you mentioned that among your clients are DocuSign and some other companies that are well known in your region as well, like OutSystems, Conversa. And my question is, how did you land these opportunities?
Okay, so you mentioned DocuSign, OutSystem, Convoso. It's funny; those three have all come from three different channels, and one is word of mouth, one is our own ABM activities, one is through kind of content marketing and SEO and stuff. So the way we approach our own customer acquisition is we have like really strategic accounts that we'd love to land, and we play a role. We have a play through our podcast of like some of these accounts that we want to. They're kind of dream accounts, but we also have our own ABM plays. But then from an SEO perspective, we have very targeted keywords that we try to rank for, and that has worked for us as well. And then word of mouth is great. When somebody makes a recommendation and a deal comes through, that's fantastic. But all those three, one has come through our work through building solid relationships through ABM campaigns for ourselves. The other one is from kind of SEO work, and the other one is from word of mouth. But it's worth clarifying, our own predominant channel of acquisition is account-based. It's an account-based approach. It allows us to practice the stuff that we preach ourselves. And I tell you, when you practice it yourself, you're a lot more granular and you're a lot more particular about what's working and what's not working. I think there are a lot of agencies who would recommend stuff, and they don't necessarily do it for themselves, and therefore they might not be able to get that insight. When you do it for yourself, you put your heart in it, right? Because you're putting money out of your own pocket. All the loopholes and how you could go around things and how it will potentially not work. So our own predominant channel of acquisition is definitely an account-based approach. That doesn't mean that we neglect some of the other channels that are out there, like I said.
What I love here, is that you mentioned that all three clients came from different channels. And this is why I want to emphasize this, is because lots of companies and lots of marketers tend to think that ABM is an ultimate strategy. So you just make a list of accounts and then you are just prospecting these accounts. And it becomes, let's say, a more fancy definition of sales prospecting and outreach, to be honest. So the truth is that you need to have a complete strategy that helps you, as you said, create the demand with specific content marketing activities, targeting specific keywords with search engine optimization, but then we have top of the funnel layer. So we can't sell saying, hey, I'm like ABM, the best ABM agency in the world or in Australia or whatever. So come and buy my stuff. Of course, so people are seeking for specific solutions. So they're searching for content and they arrive to your website, they consume the content. We are not talking about the quality. That's, let's say, a prerequisite of the good content marketing campaigns. Next, they can track the podcast, etc. And that's how you create the demand. Next, you have, as well as a side project, you have community called Growth Colony. So the link for these communities will be in the podcast description. So you guys are welcome to join. Where people can also spread the word, they can give the recommendations, and this is how what you call word of mouth. I mean, the word of mouth, aside from clients' recommendations, That's a second channel where people can spread the word. When somebody asks the question, they can send talk to Shahin so he can help with this stuff. That's an idea. And your strategic approach. So the account-based approach, as you said, this is your key channel. And let's focus on this one. If you can share maybe not all the details, but if you can at least give the approach, what did you do? How did you acquire that client? That would be really nice to hear.
Sure thing. So one of the, I think I'm trying to think of like a good example to provide of whether talk about some of the stuff that we do or some of the stuff that we do for our clients. Which one? Because some of the stuff that we do for our clients might be a little bit more sophisticated. There's a bigger budget that we could put. There's a lot more. Sometimes they're a lot more elaborate. So which one do you want to hear? Do you want to hear some of the stuff that we do ourselves, or some of the stuff that we've maybe done for our clients? Maybe we can break down
at this
campaign.
Specific moment. I suggest to focus on your own case study. So you mentioned,
all right, sounds good.
Clients, and you said one of them came from your account-based activities. So let's focus on this one without complicated stuff.
Let's do it. All right, sounds good. Let's do it. So one of the plays that we run is, we've created this community called Growth Colony, right? And as part of that, we have a podcast that it's basically Australia's B2B podcast. There's not a lot of podcasts out there in Australia or even in APAC. So we leverage our podcast in terms of identifying some of the decision makers that would be a part of an ideal customer profile for us. And we would reach out to them, but we also take into consideration that they should have something interesting to say. So we want to build that relationship with these individuals, and it's really fun to build the relationship. I mean, it's not, one of the things that I tell people when I explain this, they're like, oh, so you're bringing people on for just turn them into a customer. It's not the case. They're really awesome people. They share some really interesting insights. And I would actually love to have that personal relationship, have a conversation with. So we have a play that we leverage our podcast as well to build relationships with individuals that are in our space. They have something to share, but then those relationships sometimes turn into a engagement with these individuals. What we do is we build that relationship, we nurture that relationship heavily. So when somebody comes on the podcast, afterwards, we create snippets on LinkedIn. So there is like a one main snippet that goes out. Then we create video snippets of our conversations, of anything insightful that they've talked about. We then further reinforce that relationship sometimes by sending a gift in order to say we really appreciate you coming on the podcast. And we turn that content into blogs. That we repurpose that. We have it as a blog up on our website as well, and we really nurture those relationships. And for some of those bigger accounts, we hardly pitch at any given time to anyone that comes in, but we further develop it. So we might now have a webinar that is coming up later, and we invite somebody that is part of that. That have come on our podcast before as well. So again, we build that relationship further. The point of what we do and what we're trying to accomplish is we never pitch what we're doing, but we want to make enough noise so that they will understand what we're doing as well. And if they feel like we're relevant to what they're trying to accomplish in their day-to-day, they would reach out. And that happens very often. For them to reach out and for us to have a conversation with them. So that's one of the ABM plays that we run for ourselves for some of the strategic accounts.
But let me highlight one key thing here. As you have seen, there is no, let's say, I don't want to say this word. It won't be impolite, but okay. There is no this silly outreach when you are reaching out and pitching, hey guys, I'm Shahin, I'm running the best ABM agency in Australia. So would you like to have a chat with me? You have the relationship building focus on the top of the funnel. And basically, this is how lots of people are, messing this, let's say, marketing terms, but you can see basically you are inviting people to the podcast. This is a relationship and connection part. And now you create the demand because then you post some content on LinkedIn, you tag them. They start, of course, they are connected. They start seeing your content more and more in their newsfeed. Then you invite them to the upcoming events. So you are sharing the relevant piece of content. You invite them to the community and they engage with you more and more. And basically, this is how the demand is created. Whenever they have a need, you'll be the first person. And I believe that one of the missing points in ABM is thinking that, how to say, it's pure transactional, so you do the play and then you pitch and then you pitch again or whatever. And basically you generate the opportunities, or you just mark your opportunities as lost and focus on the new accounts. But basically the key point here is, if you are selling high ticket products or high ticket services and you have a long sales cycle, unfortunately you can't predict where the need will appear. So the key goal is exactly and what you have described is the best example of lead nurturing, because again, lots of people tend to think that lead nurturing is just a fancy cadence of emails, which is not obviously true. But all these activities is an example of lead nurturing. And this is why exactly I wanted to took this example and explain, all these modern marketing terms, in a simple way, so people understand how all these activities like demand generation, like ABM plays, like nurturing are presented in your case. So I love it. Thanks a lot for sharing.
No, that's all good. That's all good.
One question I want to discuss here, because we have never touched this in our podcast. We have, I believe you are the first guest from Australia, I believe. So all guests were either from Europe or from United States and Canada. And lots of people from Europe, of course, especially, so we have tech hubs, if you want, in Scandinavia, in Israel, and in Benelux region, so Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. And these are small countries, while the markets have high purchasing power, but these are small markets, and everybody at some point starts thinking about scaling their business and going outside their markets. And lots of them think about United States and Australia, of course, or Asia Pacific, if you want. And I would like to ask you one question. First of all, aside from standard marketing mistakes, what are the most stupid mistakes companies from other continents can make if they want to penetrate into Asia Pacific?
Thinking that inbound strategy works as well as it does in the US or in Europe, thinking that it works as well here in Australia when they're going after enterprise accounts and large organizations. Australia, New Zealand, and to a large degree APAC are a lot more conservative than some of the US markets. And that's one of the main reasons that I tell to a lot of people, obviously biased, okay, I take that, but I also say that an outbound approach has some certain merits that inbound doesn't have. In the US market, you have people tend to be a little bit more aggressive, and I'm not saying aggressive in a negative tone of it, but they're more forthcoming, they're more willing to reach out, right? That is significantly less in the Australian market, and people are more conservative, and a lot of organizations need a nudge in order to engage you. So if you are an organization that have been killing it with inbound, especially we're talking about larger organizations, smaller organizations still inbound does work, but if you're you're going after larger organizations, your inbound strategy is not going to be as scalable here as it is in the US. And we see this time and time again. Organizations who have a HQ in the US, their inbound and demand gen strategies are working perfectly, and they're just getting all of this demand coming in. Try to replicate it in Asia Pacific, and it falls apart and it doesn't work. So that is the biggest challenge that I see organizations from other regions coming to APAC and trying to replicate some of the channel strategies that they have, or marketing strategies that they have, and it falls apart.
And in this case, what works really well, or what you can recommend? Oh, let me ask you, maybe let me rephrase it. So let's pretend you have an office in Belgium, and now you are coming to Australia to launch, to scale your business in Asia Pacific. So what will you do? How your program will look like? So considering that all these facts that you have mentioned, so what you'll be doing, how you'll be running your marketing and ABM programs?
Yeah, it's a small market, but you need a more sophisticated marketing strategy for it. And it's counterintuitive because people are saying it's a small market, it's going to be easier. Oh, what are you talking about? But it's a small market, you need a more sophisticated marketing campaign. You need to run your demand gen strategy, your content strategy, all that stuff. But that's not going to cut it. You then need to layer your outbound ABM, whatever you want to call it, outbound strategy on top of that. And you also want to incorporate your channel strategy. Again, we're talking about big organizations. You need to have a channel strategy for kind of global system integrators, the Deloittes, the KPMGs, the Accentures, these big guys. You need to have a strategy for them, because guess what? The big banks, it's so difficult to get into the big banks in Australia unless somebody from Accenture walks in and say, you know what, you should look at this solution. So you have to have your channel strategy. But also on top of your demand gen strategy, you have to put an outbound strategy as well. Because what happens in a lot of organizations, they would see something, they were like, yeah, that sounds interesting. And that's it. It stops there. People might not reach out. And therefore, with an outbound strategy, what you're really doing is you're giving them a nudge, and you're saying, would you like to see more about this? Would you want me to? You need to kind of put it in front of them a lot more elaborately and make it a lot easier for them. And an outbound strategy does that. So that's the core of it. You need a more holistic strategy for your APAC, for Australia, for New Zealand, when you're entering the market.
Love it. And you mentioned in the beginning, and you mentioned right now, that you need to have a more sophisticated strategy. And you said in the beginning that you are running slightly different programs for your clients, more sophisticated. So can you reveal, maybe without names, of course, but can you reveal any, let's say, ABM strategy or any ABM campaign that worked really well in that sophisticated way, if you will?
Yeah. Okay. Let's dissect one of the campaigns. So this was a campaign that we were running against 100 accounts, right? And we worked a fair bit on those 100 accounts to pick them. And it wasn't just like, this is another challenge that a lot of organizations have. They're like, here's 100 accounts. Let's just target them. So we had 100 accounts, and this is a little bit, if you talk to a purist ABM, strategist, they would be like, 100 accounts, that's not ABM. It's either 4 or maybe maximum 10 or 20. What I say is depends on the organization and depends on a couple other factors when you define that. But we had 100 accounts that we're going after. What we put in place was a warm-up strategy at the beginning. So we had
Hold on, let me ask you one just question. So these 100 accounts, so they belonged to one tier, or this was a mix of 3 tiers?
So this was 2 tiers, right? 2 tiers, but the distinction was not as much. So you can kind of put them in one tier as well. But there were 20 accounts here that got more love than the other 80, right?
Okay. That's clear.
So yeah, so you could kind of put them in one tier. There weren't massive differences in terms of what we did for those 20 versus those the other ones, but So take it with a grain of salt when I say there were 2 tiers,
And
right?
one more question here. I believe that lots of listeners are curious about this. How did you select these accounts? So did you use any firmographic data or any sort of intent data to build that list?
Yeah. So what we do, first of all, we take insights from our clients, right? That's easy. Let's talk about what are some of the accounts that are they have a large amount of success attached to them, meaning that you're going to get a lot of money if you land them, but at the same time they have a high likelihood of success, meaning that you're a good fit for them. Don't just go and pick something out of the air and be like, this is my dream account, I want to land them. Does not work. So that's the first component. That's a given process. But what we always do is we build a prioritization matrix for our clients, and the prioritization matrix will have firmographic data. It would have recency data. So do we know anyone from here? Have they interacted with our organization in the past? Who has interacted with our organization in the past? Getting information on some of the personas. Have they, is there anyone recently joined in this organization that has a score associated to it? And then the firmographic and technographic data would come in. So we build that matrix, and we take all of those accounts through that matrix to either disqualify them or prioritize them, right? So that's how we usually go through with our account selection and account prioritization.
Cool. Thanks.
So once we went through that process, no, that's all good. Once we went through that process, we did that. Then we had a warm-up campaign. We didn't have a very sophisticated warm-up campaign over here. What we really did was we did a little bit of a social nurture. And what I mean by that is through social channels and IP targeted ads, what we did was we took them through problem statements. So we directed the traffic through, this is a problem that the industry is having. And also then a couple of weeks after that, we changed that message to, this is potentially a solution for it. So they were consuming this on social. We were not capturing any email information from them. But all we wanted to do were 2 things: make them aware about the problem, make them aware about the solution. But what we also did was we made sure that our brand, our logo, was very visible, so that when we're doing an outreach component, people will go and say, you know what, I've seen that logo somewhere. I don't know where I've seen it, but I've seen it somewhere. And that increases the likelihood of somebody responding to your brand. So that was one of the main intentions that we had as well. So we had that warm up campaign that was going for, I think it was about month and a half, targeting these 100 accounts. And then we had a sequence of activities that we're rolling out. Some of 20 of these accounts had dedicated landing pages for them, and also we put a lot of love in direct mail component. So so what we did in this situation was we were targeting CIOs, system engineers, and IT managers in these organizations. So 3 persona. So with our top accounts, we were obviously nurturing them through advertising, but what we also did was we did a lot of work in terms of understanding what is the narrative that we want to put in place here, what is the messaging that we want to do, and we came to deciding we were going to be talking about stress. So what we did was we sent a box to the CIOs, and the message was 2020 was a stressful year. It was, especially for CIO, you had to take your team of 200, 300, 500,000 people remote in a blink of an eye. You had to make sure that it's secure. The VPN system would break down. You would get constant tickets. It was a stressful year for CIOs. Here's a bottle of whiskey. Here's a glass. Here's an ice maker with it. Here's some chocolate. Here's also a Band-Aid for patching, for those late night patching that you have to do on your servers. Let us help you in 2021 so that you don't go through the same issues, right? That was the core message that we were sending. And then everything talked about that. The ads that they were seeing was talking about the whiskey and the relaxing. The landing page was talking about the same thing. We made sure it was very consistent. And then at the same time, we had the sales team. We worked with the same sales team to make sure that the email sequence, the calls, and everything that is going out is completely consistent. And also the link, we leveraged LinkedIn as well as another channel. that all of that is consistent with the message that we're putting out, and then enabling sales to kind of book those meetings in there. I mean, at the end of it, we had this 100 accounts. We booked 26 meetings, and within 4 weeks, there was 1.2 million in pipe that sales had assigned a dollar value to an opportunity in the pipeline. It was, it's a really good return on investment. And I have to say that the sales team at our client side was quite capable as well. But this is some of the things that are possible. When I turn to somebody and I say, within 4 weeks, we had 7 opportunities. And when you tell somebody you're going to get a 7% target accounts to opportunities created in your account, they're like, get out of here, shut the front door. There's no way. But I think that the kind of message in there is that when you make sure all the steps are right, the right accounts are selected, you properly warm them up. You have a sales team that are bought in. That was super crucial. You have to get the sales team excited about what you're doing.
That was my next question.
We got the sales team involved from the very beginning, and they saw the amount of work that was going into this, and they had their contribution to what they think is a good idea, what they think is not a good idea. They felt part of the campaign, and that made a massive difference versus marketing going and saying, we had a couple of meetings with sales, and hey, here's a campaign ready for you to go. Good luck. Let us know what happens. And then sitting back and waiting for magic to happen. It does not happen. It falls flat. So making sure that sales is fully on board and you're on the same page. What I usually say is marketing is used to playing tennis. It's a one-man kind of team, and one person is responsible for getting all the scores. When you go into ABM, you're playing soccer. You're not playing tennis anymore. There is a whole team, and it becomes a lot more complex, and you have to think about the dynamics and what's going where and how things are moving around. But you got to keep all of that into consideration in order for it to be successful. But also, guess what? When you score a goal, the whole stadium is going to explode versus somebody saying 15 love, right? It's a world of difference when you score something in ABM as well. So I think that's those are all things to take into consideration.
That's a brilliant example for ex-soccer player. It sounds like a music.
There you go.
Yeah, so it's a fantastic example. Thanks a lot. One quick question: how many SDRs or salespeople were involved into that campaign?
2.
So 50 accounts per sales rep.
That's it.
Bravo. What can I say? So that's a fantastic example. Thanks a lot for sharing all this knowledge with us. I believe that these case studies that we have discussed, I believe they, describe pretty well what account-based marketing means. Of course, we could, we could have a just high-level discussion what it is not, but I believe people are tired of these conversations. And these practical examples, they described how ABM practically works. And as well, you have seen, so we touched the lead nurturing part, the demand generation part in different aspects. So it's not just, one channel where you have email cadences, or you just do the advertisement, or you are just running some outreach cadences, whatever. So this is a sophisticated strategy, and the examples you have mentioned are brilliant as well. I love the examples about APAC region, so which is really nice to hear from a person who lives in that region. And I believe lots of companies are making these mistakes, applying the same approach they have on their local market or on their local region and thinking that it will work there. So that was pretty good, especially that fact that you mentioned people are more conservative, so you need to have like a completely different approach here. And for our listeners, guys, Shahin is running his own podcast where he is talking with B2B marketing practitioners, with people from companies like he mentioned, Oracle, Microsoft, etc., discussing enterprise account-based marketing. So you'll find the link in the podcast description, or if you are watching this on YouTube, so you'll see it under this video. As well, there will be a link to their website. So if you prefer text case studies, you can find a lot of the case studies on their blog. And yeah, feel free to connect with LinkedIn. He is sharing lots of great content about account-based marketing. Thanks a lot, mate, for joining us.
Andre, absolute pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me.
Okay, and guys, if you like that episode, just leave us a short feedback in the comments, and see you in the next episodes. Cheers.